Today I'm going to tell you a story so brutal, it leaves a mark set in the unforgiving heart of the American Wild West. A land of scorched earth, long shadows, and choices that cost more than blood, where broken lives cross paths at the edge of survival. It all begins with a single moment, a woman collapsing in the dust that was small enough to miss, but powerful enough to drag buried sins back into the light. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun showed no mercy. It burned the land bare, split the ground open, turned the air into a wavering sheet of heat. In that scorched stillness, a young woman staggered through waist-high, lifeless grass. Her hands were bound in front of her. The rope had eaten into her wrists, skin torn and swollen slick with blood. Each breath came shallow and uneven, like her lungs were failing her. Every step felt like a battle she was already losing. Her knees buckled. She went down hard, the dirt ripping skin from bone. Dust flooded her mouth thick and bitter. She gagged. For a long moment, she didn't move. The heat pressed her into the ground, heavy and unforgiving like judgment. Then she saw it ahead of her, a barrel. Broken, sun-bleached, cracked and half-swallowed by the dry earth. She dragged herself toward it, pulling her tied hands behind her like dead weight. When she reached the barrel, she tried to stand. The wood collapsed under her grip, splinters biting into her palms. She leaned against it anyway. It was the last thing left that could hold her upright. Her dress hung in tatters, smeared with blood and dust. Her hair stuck to her face in damp strands. Flies swarmed her arms, her mouth the raw wounds along her skin. She tried to wave them away, but her strength was gone. Her voice came out broken and dry. Please, God, not like this. The sound of hooves cut through the silence. Slow, measured. Her eyes stayed open, unfocused, already drifting somewhere far away. He saw the bruises, the burned mark on her arm, the dirt ground into every line of her face. He didn't reach for his gun. He didn't speak. He took off his hat and let the sun fall full across his weathered face. His name was Rafe Holloway, 58 years old. A rancher who had buried everything that ever mattered to him and still hadn't learned how to walk past suffering. He had seen death. He had dealt it. But this was different. This was cruelty carved into flesh. This was hell standing in open daylight. Rafe knelt beside her. His voice came low and steady. "Miss, you're safe now." She laughed a thin, fractured sound. "Safe." The word broke in her throat. "There's no safe," she whispered. "Not while he's still breathing." Rafe Holloway's eyes hardened. She looked at him, then pupils blown wide, unfocused. Her mouth trembled. Crowley Vance. Her body went slack. Her head tipped forward and she collapsed against him. Her breathing was barely there. Rafe caught her before she hit the dirt. Her skin burned under his hands, fever hot. He lifted her without effort. She weighed nothing, limp as a child's doll. He stared out toward the empty horizon, jaw locked. The name rang in his head, Crowley Vance. He knew it. He despised it. And he knew this meeting wasn't chance. He looked down at the woman in his arms. Her wrists were still bound. The rope bit deep. Her pulse fluttered weak. In the quiet, Rafe felt something stir he hadn't carried in years, the weight of responsibility. It settled heavy in his chest. "All right," he muttered. "You asked the wrong man? Then quiet or rougher, I ain't the one who's going to kill you." He lifted her onto his horse. Cinder swung into the saddle and turned toward the valley. The sun flared behind them. The wind carried a faint trace of gun oil and old blood from somewhere far off. A crow cried. Rafe didn't look back. He rode a long stretch before stopping. staring down at her where she leaned against him. The ropes on her wrists looked older than her fear. He pulled his pocket knife and sliced through the bindings. The tension snapped. She flinched hard. Her hands dropped useless. The skin was raw, bruised. Easy now, he murmured, his voice all grit and regret. She didn't answer. Her eyes rolled back. Her body went still again. Rafe scanned the horizon one last time. No dust. No riders. Only thick heat and the rasping chorus of cicadas. He mounted again, settling her carefully against him. The ride back was filled with whispers, names, places, half-prayers that made no sense. He didn't listen too close. He'd learned long ago that pain spoke in its own tongue. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was sinking behind the hills. The place looked worn and forgotten. Paint long stripped from the fences. The barn leaned like it had quit years ago. It wasn't much, but it was safe. Rafe laid her on a cot in the spare room. She stirred but didn't wake. The fever still burned through her. He sat beside her, rubbing the back of his neck, thinking how he'd sworn off saving people years ago. He'd buried too many. And yet, here he was. When she finally opened her eyes, the first thing she did was reach for her wrists. She stared at them, at the rope burns, then up at him. "You untied me," she whispered. It felt like the decent thing he said quietly. Her eyes searched his face, wary at first, then easing. "Why help me?" she asked. "You don't even know me?" Rafe gave a small shrug. "Don't reckon I have to. You look like someone who's already carried more pain than a lifetime ought to allow." She stared past him for a moment, lips shaking. "My name's Eden Pike. I used to be a teacher. Back east." Rafe nodded once. The word teacher sounded out of place in this empty stretch of land. Her voice cracked as she went on. "They lied to me, said it was a school." She swallowed. It wasn't. Rafe studied her a long moment. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He'd seen that look before. Years ago, under a different flag, he'd watched men do worse things and call it duty. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the distant smell of rain. Rafe turned toward the door. He had questions, but none that would find answers tonight. As he stepped into the fading light, one thought settled hard in his mind. If Eden Pike was telling the truth, then the devil himself was loose in Montana. Morning came quiet. Too quiet. Rafe stood by the trough, filling it while Cinder drank. The heat was already building, the kind that made the air ripple over dirt. Eden sat on the porch, wrapped in one of Rafe's old shirts, eyes fixed on the horizon, like something out there still hunted her. She didn't talk much. Rafe didn't press. That suited them both. By noon, cicadas screamed, and the air smelled of dust and storm. That was when Rafe heard hooves. Not from town. From the south road. He looked up, hand resting near his holster. A rider came into view, slow, unsteady. The horse was limping. The woman slid off before the animal fully stopped. Her dress was coated in trail dust. Rafe blinked once. She looked thinner than he remembered. Hair pinned wrong, face pale but set with purpose. "Rafe," she said, voice shaking. "I didn't know where else to go." Rafe frowned. "Maeve Hollis, Jonah's wife. You look half dead, girl. What happened?" She didn't answer. She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a small wooden box, clutching it like it might vanish. "I brought something," she said. "You need to see it." Rafe took the box. It felt heavier than it looked. Inside were papers, letters, names written in careful script, receipts, folded bills. Then he saw it. Jonah Holloway's handwriting. Rafe's blood went cold. "What is this?" he asked quietly. Maeve's voice broke. "It's everything, Rafe. everything Crowley Vance has been doing, and Jonah's part in it. She drew a breath that sounded like a sob. I tried to stop him. I begged him. He said Crowley owns him now, said the only way out is death. Rafe's jaw tightened. He scanned the pages again, fresh ink, women's names, dates, payments. Something dark crept up his spine. You shouldn't have brought this here, he said low. If Crowley finds out you took it, he'll send men. I know, Maeve whispered, tears spilling. That's why I came to you. She looked at him desperate. You're the only man he's afraid of. Rafe didn't answer. He turned toward the horizon instead, the sun flaring off the brim of his hat. He could feel it, something heavy building miles out, a storm gathering strength with every passing second. Eden Pike stepped onto the porch, then stopping short when she saw Maeve Hollis for the first time. Her eyes widened. 3 lives now, bound together by fear, by blood, and by the shadow of one man. Rafe lifted the wooden box, its weight settling into his palm like a bad omen. He muttered low, more to himself than anyone else. If Crowley Vance is riding this way, he said, then hell's riding with him. Morning came hard and bright. Rafe rode out carrying the weight of a man who'd already made his choice. Behind him, the ranch shrank into a wavering blur of heat. The plain stretched empty ahead, leading toward the broken church Maeve had spoken of. She'd begged him not to go alone. Eden hadn't said a word, only watched from the porch, fear quiet but deep in her eyes. Rafe knew that look. It always meant goodbye. Heat shimmered as he rode. Dust clung to his coat, sweat burned along his neck. Every fence post felt like a grave marker, another soul claimed by this land. When the steeple finally rose into view, the world fell silent, save for the hum of flies. The church sat half buried in weeds. Windows shattered, doors hanging loose. Rafe dismounted, tied Cinder to a fence rail, and waited. Anyone here, he called. Only his echo answered until a voice drifted out from the shade. Always figured you'd die slow, Captain. Rafe turned his head just enough to see him. Slade Core, Crowley Vance's right hand. A man Rafe had once fought beside back when law and chaos wore the same face. Rafe exhaled. So Crowley sent you. Slade smiled, thin and mean. Sent me to remind you where you stand. You don't belong in his affairs. Rafe's hand rested near his coat. I'm not in his business, he said calmly. I'm ending it. Slade's grin vanished. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Rafe spoke low. You could still walk away, son. The answer came without words. Leather cleared. 2 guns rose. The shots split the silence. Dust kicked up as Rafe staggered back, fire tearing through his shoulder. Slade dropped to his knees, blood soaking the dirt. He tried to speak, but the wind carried his breath away. Rafe stood still, chest heaving, smoke curling from his barrel. He looked down and saw something glinting near Slade's hand. A brass lighter. Rafe picked it up, turned it over. Scratched into the metal were 2 letters, J-E-R-H, Jonah Holloway. The wind shifted, then hot air sweeping the grass, carrying the smell of rain and gunpowder. Rafe closed his fist around the lighter. For the first time in years, his eyes burned. He looked west, where dark clouds were rolling in fast. All right, he murmured. Little brother. Is this conversation helpful so far? Rafe muttered under his breath. If that's how it's going to be, then come find me. Thunder rolled across the open plains. The first drops of rain struck the dirt like dark stains. Somewhere far beyond the wall of storm, Jonah Holloway was already riding hard for home. That night the rain came fast and cold, scouring dust and blood from the land. Rafe pushed Cinder hard, one hand clamped to his wounded shoulder, the other tight on the reins. Lightning split the sky, lighting his path in harsh flashes. He didn't pray. He only whispered his brother's name with every breath. When the ranch finally appeared, the storm was already tearing through the valley. The barn doors slammed wildly in the wind. Eden Pike stood near the porch lantern, shaking in her grip. Behind her, Maeve Hollis cried out from inside the house. Rafe swung down from the saddle and ran. Jonah was there, soaked, furious, trembling, with something caught between rage and regret. A gun hung in his hand, but his eyes were worse than the weapon. "Why Jonah?" Rafe said, his voice worn thin, not angry. "You could have built something honest. You could have been better." Jonah's lips quivered. "I tried," he said hoarsely. "But Crowley Vance owns everything. The law, the people." He swallowed. "Me." "You made your choices," Rafe said softly. Then he added, "But you can still choose again." Jonah's hand shook. The sound that followed tore silence in half. When the smoke cleared, Jonah lay sprawled on the floor, his gun still warm. Rafe dropped to his knees beside him. Blood seeped into the old wooden planks, the same floor they'd once learned to walk on as boys. Jonah's eyes searched his brother's face. "Being decent," Jonah whispered weakly. "It never saved anyone." Rafe shook his head, tears mixing with rain. "It saved you now." Jonah's chest rose once, then fell still. Outside, the wind eased. The thunder rolled back into the mountains. Rafe stepped into the rain. Eden was there, holding Maeve close. No words were needed. Rafe gave a single nod, the kind that carried everything and nothing at once. By dawn, the storm had passed. Rafe saddled 2 horses and pressed an old book into Eden's hands. Great Expectations. The pages were worn, the spine cracked, but it was all he had left from the life before. "Keep it," he said. "Teach again. Make it matter." She offered a small, fragile smile. "You're coming with us, aren't you?" Rafe looked toward the northern hills, sunlight breaking over wet grass. "I'll ride a while," he said. "There's still work to finish." They parted. The sun climbed free of the clouds, and for the first time in years, the land looked clean. Being decent didn't fix the world, but sometimes it saved the few hearts still willing to listen. And maybe that was enough. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal, barra disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.